Story 1: Kevin's Encounter with the Intruder. Kevin Manning was a creature of habit. Every weekday, he worked the opening shift at a sleek, high-end bar in the heart of the city. He loved his job. The hum of conversation, the clink of ice cubes, the quiet thrill of crafting a cocktail that could make someone's day, all of it gave his otherwise solitary life a purpose. But Friday nights were different. The crowd was louder, the orders more extravagant, and the expectations unrelenting. Kevin thrived under pressure. Yet every now and then, he'd glance at the clock, counting down the hours until he could retreat to the sanctuary of his apartment. On this particular Friday, Kevin's evening began like any other. The bar buzzed with energy, filled with people celebrating the end of the workweek. A couple at the end of the bar toasted with glasses of wine, their laughter blending with the background jazz. A group of friends gathered near the back, snapping selfies and arguing over which shots to order next. Kevin moved with practiced efficiency, his hands a blur of motion as he mixed drinks and bantered with regulars. Then he walked in. The man appeared just after 10:30, when the bar was at its peak. Kevin noticed him immediately, not because he stood out, but because he didn't. Amid the tailored suits and polished shoes, this man was an anomaly. His hoodie, faded and loose, hung off his frame like a shadow. His jeans were scuffed, and his hair looked like it hadn't seen a comb in weeks. But it was his eyes that unnerved Kevin the most. Dark, unblinking, and filled with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through him. Kevin offered his usual friendly smile as the man approached the bar. "Evening. What can I get you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he tilted his head, studying Kevin with a faint smirk. "Kevin," he finally said, his voice low and gravelly, "I'll take a double shot of Jaeger." Kevin froze. He didn't recall ever seeing this guy before. Yet the man spoke his name like they were old acquaintances. Shaking off the unease, Kevin nodded and poured the drink. "Here you go." The man took the glass but didn't drink. Instead, he leaned closer, his smirk widening. "Do you remember me?" Kevin frowned. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've met." The man chuckled, a sound that sent a chill racing down Kevin's spine. "Oh. You'll remember soon enough." Before Kevin could respond, the man downed the shot, tossed a crumpled bill onto the counter, and walked away. Kevin watched as he disappeared into the elevator, a sense of unease settling in his chest. By the time Kevin's shift ended at 2 a.m., he'd almost convinced himself that the encounter was meaningless. People were strange sometimes, especially after a few drinks. He drove home through the quiet streets, the city lights casting a faint glow against the night sky. Kevin lived alone in a modest third-floor apartment. It wasn't much, but it was cozy, a haven from the chaos of the bar. He double-checked the locks on his front door, a habit he'd developed over years of city living, and kicked off his shoes. Despite his exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. The stranger's words echoed in his mind, "Do you remember me?" He tried to recall if he'd met the man before, but nothing came to him. Frustrated, he turned off the bedside lamp and closed his eyes. Hours later, Kevin awoke with a start. At first, he thought it was a noise that had woken him, a creak, perhaps, or the distant hum of traffic. But as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw it, a figure standing in the corner of his room. At first, Kevin thought it was a trick of the shadows. But the longer he stared, The clearer the figure became, a tall, lean man, his features obscured by the dim light. "Who's there?" Kevin's voice was barely a whisper, his throat tight with fear. The figure didn't respond. It simply stood there, motionless, watching. Kevin's heart pounded in his chest as he fumbled for his phone on the nightstand. But before he could reach it, the figure moved, swift and deliberate. Kevin barely had time to react before the intruder was upon him, his hands clutching a knife that glinted in the faint moonlight. Adrenaline surged through Kevin's veins as he rolled off the bed, narrowly avoiding the blade. He grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and swung it with all his strength. The intruder stumbled back, giving Kevin just enough time to bolt out of the bedroom. In the hallway, Kevin's mind raced. His phone was still in the bedroom, and the front door felt miles away. He ran into the kitchen, grabbing a frying pan from the counter. The intruder followed, his movements eerily calm despite the chaos. "Why are you doing this?" Kevin shouted, his voice trembling. The man didn't answer. He lunged forward, and Kevin swung the pan, the sound of metal clanging against the knife echoing through the apartment. For what felt like an eternity, the two men fought, a desperate, violent dance of survival. Kevin's arms ached from the repeated swings, and his breaths came in ragged gasps. But finally, with one last desperate push, he managed to knock the knife from the intruder's hand. Seizing the opportunity, Kevin shoved the man toward the door. The intruder stumbled, then turned and sprinted down the hallway. Kevin slammed the door shut and locked it, his hands shaking uncontrollably. When the police arrived, Kevin recounted the entire ordeal. But as they searched the apartment, they found no signs of forced entry. All the doors and windows were locked, just as Kevin had left them. "Are you sure you locked everything?" one officer asked. "Yes," Kevin insisted. "I always double-check." The officers exchanged glances but said nothing. They took Kevin's statement and promised to review the bar's security footage. But their tone suggested they didn't expect to find much. The next day, Kevin called the bar to ask about the footage. The manager pulled up the recordings and confirmed that the man had been there, but there was no clear shot of his face, and no clues as to his identity. Days turned into weeks, and the police investigation went cold. Kevin tried to move on, but the memory of that night lingered. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that flickered in the corner of his vision, sent his heart racing. Haunted by unanswered questions, Kevin began digging into his past, wondering if he'd crossed paths with the intruder before. He reached out to old friends, distant relatives, even former co-workers. But no one recognized the description of the man. Then, one day, Kevin received a package in the mail. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, a picture of him, taken from outside his apartment window. On the back of the photo, in jagged handwriting, was a single word, soon. Story 2, the Eerie elderly couple. Adam Bradley had worked at the Moonlight Bar for nearly 3 years. Nestled in the heart of downtown, the place thrived on its reputation for being a mix of casual and classy. Weeknights drew a quiet crowd, corporate types, solo drinkers, and a few regulars who nursed the same drinks night after night. Weekends, though, were a completely different beast. It was a Friday night, the busiest shift of the week. Adam was in his element, juggling orders, mixing cocktails, and engaging in light banter with the customers. The music was loud enough to keep the energy up, but not so deafening that people couldn't hold conversations. As the night wore on, Adam noticed a couple of unfamiliar faces, a group of college students ordering rounds of tequila, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit nursing a whiskey, and a woman celebrating her promotion with her co-workers. But none of them stood out the way the elderly couple did. They appeared suddenly, sitting in the corner booth furthest from the bar. Adam didn't see them come in, and that alone was odd. From his vantage point, he had a clear view of the door. He was certain he would have noticed them walking past. The man wore a dark suit, the fabric faded and fraying at the edges, as though it had seen decades of wear. The woman sat beside him in a floral print dress, her posture stiff and unnatural. Both of them were pale, so pale that under the dim lighting, their skin seemed almost gray. They didn't speak to each other, didn't gesture, didn't move. At first, Adam assumed they were waiting for someone. It wasn't uncommon for people to grab a booth and wait for their friends to arrive. But as the minutes turned into half an hour, the couple remained eerily still. Adam's co-worker, Jess, noticed them too. She nudged him as she passed by. "Hey, check out the Addams Family rejects in the corner. What's their deal?" Adam chuckled, but the sound came out forced. "Maybe they're just shy." Jess raised an eyebrow. "Shy? They're staring at the wall like it owes them money." Adam glanced over again. Jess was right, they weren't just sitting silently. They were both staring intently at the same blank section of the wall, as if it held some secret only they could see. Something about them made Adam's skin crawl, but he pushed the feeling aside and focused on his work. Around 9 p.m., the bar was at full capacity. Adam was slammed, moving from one customer to the next with barely a moment to breathe. When the rush finally eased, he realized the elderly couple hadn't ordered anything. Feeling obligated to check on them, Adam approached the booth. He put on his best customer service smile. "Good evening. Can I get you anything to eat or drink?" The man turned his head slowly, almost mechanically, to face Adam. His eyes were sunken, dark circles etched beneath them like shadows carved into his skin. "No," the man said, his voice raspy and low. Adam waited for more, but the man simply turned back to the wall. The woman didn't react at all. She didn't even blink. "Okay," Adam said awkwardly. "Let me know if you need anything." He walked back to the bar, his unease deepening. As the night progressed, Adam found himself stealing glances at the couple. They hadn't moved an inch. Their stillness was unnatural, like mannequins forgotten in the corner of a department store. When he mentioned them to Jess again, she shrugged. Maybe they're waiting for someone who stood them up. Sad. But it happens. But Adam couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. The air around their booth felt heavy, almost oppressive. And the longer he looked at them, the more he felt a strange pressure in his chest, like a weight he couldn't see or explain. By midnight, the crowd had thinned out. Most of the customers had paid their tabs and left, leaving only a handful of stragglers. Adam began wiping down the bar, glancing occasionally at the corner booth. That's when he realized they weren't staring at the wall anymore. The man and woman had turned their heads in unison, their hollow eyes now fixed on Adam. He froze, his hand gripping the damp cloth. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The intensity of their gaze was overwhelming, as if they could see straight through him, peeling back the layers of his mind. "Adam?" Jess's voice snapped him out of his trance. He turned to her. His heart racing. Did you see that? See what? He looked back at the booth. It was empty. Adam tried to shake off the encounter as he and Jess locked up for the night. But as he stepped outside, the cool night air did little to calm his nerves. He lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply, and glanced across the street. That's when he saw them. The elderly couple stood under a flickering streetlight, their pale faces illuminated by the dim yellow glow. They weren't moving. They weren't speaking. They were just staring. Adam's breath hitched. He wanted to say something, to call Jess over, but the words caught in his throat. Then the streetlight flickered again, and they were gone. The following morning, Adam couldn't shake the memory of the couple. He asked Jess if she'd seen them when they left the bar, but she just gave him a confused look. What are you talking about? I didn't see anyone like that. Adam frowned. They were sitting in the corner booth all night. Jess shrugged. Adam, I think you're overworked. Take a day off or something. But Adam knew what he saw. Over the next few weeks, strange things began happening at the bar. Bottles fell from shelves without warning. The jukebox played songs no one selected. And every now and then, late at night, Adam felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Determined to understand what had happened, Adam began researching the building's history. He discovered that the Moonlight Bar had once been a boarding house in the early 1900s. Rumor had it that a reclusive couple had lived there for decades, rarely interacting with anyone. One night, a fire broke out, consuming the building. The couple's bodies were never found. Months later, on a particularly quiet night, Adam stayed late to close up. As he wiped down the corner booth, he felt the air grow cold. When he looked up, the elderly couple was sitting there. "Why are you here?" Adam whispered, his voice trembling. The man smiled, a thin, eerie smile that sent a chill down Adam's spine. "You let us in," the man said. Adam backed away, his heart pounding. When he blinked, the booth was empty again. What do you think the couple wanted from Adam? Do you believe they were ghosts, or something else entirely? Have you ever felt like you were being watched when no one was there? Story 3, The AirTag Stalker. Have you ever felt like someone was following you? Not in a crowded street or a busy mall, but in the quiet, vulnerable moments when you're alone. Imagine discovering that someone has been watching your every move, waiting for the perfect time to strike. This is exactly what happened to Emily. She wasn't the kind of person who believed in conspiracy theories or worried about hidden cameras in coffee shops. She lived her life simply. Though lately, it had been overshadowed by the pain of a recent breakup. On one fateful night, seeking solace and a sense of normalcy, she decided to visit a bar she and her ex had frequented. She thought it would be a harmless trip down memory lane. But by the end of the night, Emily's life had spiraled into a terrifying nightmare, one where every shadow felt like a threat. And her own safety was no longer in her hands. What started as a nostalgic visit ended with the chilling discovery of an AirTag tracking her location, planted by a man who wouldn't take no for an answer. The bar hadn't changed much since Emily's last visit. The dim lighting, the scuffed pool tables, the old jukebox playing songs no one had requested, it all felt like stepping into a time capsule. Emily ordered a drink, trying to shake off the pang of nostalgia that came with every glance around the room. This was where she and her ex had spent countless evenings, laughing, talking, and competing over games of pool. It was their thing. A small but meaningful part of their 2.5-year relationship. She sipped her drink slowly, debating whether she should leave. But just as she considered finishing her drink and heading home, a man approached her. "Up for a game?" he asked, gesturing to the pool table. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with an easy smile and a casual demeanor that didn't immediately set off any alarms. Reluctantly, Emily nodded. It felt better than sitting alone, drowning in memories. The game started innocently enough. They played a few rounds, and Emily's competitive streak took over. She won every match, though she noticed the man's smile fading with each loss. Still, he seemed friendly enough, buying her drinks and chatting between shots. It wasn't until the fourth game that he made his move. "You know," he said, leaning on his cue stick, "we should take this back to my place. Bet I've got a setup that could finally give you a challenge." Emily laughed nervously, shaking her head. "I think I'll pass. Thanks." Though his smile vanished completely. "Seriously?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Yes," Emily replied firmly, her discomfort growing. For a moment, he just stared at her, his jaw tight. Then, without another word, he grabbed her wrist. Emily froze, the man's grip cold and unyielding. "Hey," she said, pulling her arm back. "Let go." The man scowled but released her, muttering something under his breath. He grabbed her purse, rifling through it briefly before tossing it back onto the table. "You owe me for the drinks," he snarled. Emily's heart raced. Before she could respond, two older patrons at the bar noticed the commotion and intervened. "Is there a problem here?" one of them asked, his voice firm. The man glared at Emily, then at the older patrons. Finally, he stormed out of the bar, muttering curses as he went. Emily thanked the men profusely, her hands trembling as she grabbed her things. The night's excitement had killed any desire to stay, and she quickly ordered an Uber. The ride home was uneventful, though Emily couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. She replayed the interaction in her mind, berating herself for not leaving sooner. When the Uber dropped her off, she stepped into the quiet of her neighborhood, her street illuminated by a few dim streetlights. As she rummaged through her purse for her keys, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting a text or an email. Instead, her stomach dropped. "AirTag detected near you." The notification felt like a punch to the gut. Her hands shook as she opened the alert. It showed a map, with a red dot following her exact location. Panic surged through her. She dumped her purse onto the ground, her belongings scattering across the pavement. Amid her wallet, makeup, and keys was a small white disc. The AirTag. Emily's breath came in short gasps as she stared at the device. Without thinking, she stomped on it, her shoe grinding it into the asphalt until it cracked. Her mind raced. Had the man from the bar put it there? How long had he been tracking her? Emily hurried inside, locking the door behind her. She paced her living room, her thoughts a chaotic spiral of fear and paranoia. Should she call the police? Would they even take her seriously? Her phone buzzed again, and she flinched. This time, it was a friend checking in. She wanted to reply, to explain what had happened, but her hands felt too unsteady. She decided to peek out the window, hoping the fresh air might calm her nerves. Instead, her fear deepened. A car was idling across the street. It was an old, beat-up sedan with its headlights off, barely visible under the dim glow of the streetlight. Emily's pulse quickened as the car slowly rolled forward, its engine a low hum in the quiet night. It passed her house, paused briefly, then disappeared around the corner. Minutes later, it came back. This time, it stopped directly in front of her driveway. Emily ducked below the window, her heart pounding in her ears. She peeked again, just in time to see the driver roll down his window. The man from the bar. His face was partially obscured by shadow, but she recognized him instantly. Worse, she saw something glinting in his hand, a knife. Emily stifled a scream and crawled to the corner of the room. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights scaring the man off before they could get close. Emily explained everything: the encounter at the bar, the AirTag, the car outside her house. But without a license plate number or any solid evidence, there wasn't much they could do. "He knows where I live," Emily said, her voice shaking. One of the officers gave her a sympathetic look. "We'll patrol the area tonight, but keep your doors locked. If you see him again, call us immediately." The next day, Emily installed new locks and a security camera. But the fear lingered. She avoided the bar, changed her routine, and even considered moving. Though weeks passed without incident, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time her phone buzzed, every time a car slowed near her house, she felt her stomach clench. She never saw the man again, but the memory of his glare and the AirTag haunted her. How do you think Emily could have handled the situation differently? Have you ever experienced something similar, a stranger invading your privacy? What would you do if you found an AirTag tracking your location? If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to hit the like button. It lets us know you want more tales that blur the line between reality and nightmare. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Wolf Tells for weekly stories that will make you think twice about the safety of your own shadow. Want to help someone else stay safe? Share this video with your friends, it might be the warning they need. Remember, the scariest monsters aren't always hiding under your bed or in your closet. Sometimes, they're the ones you see every day: the stranger at the bar, the car idling down your street, the silent stalker who knows where you live. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and as always, join us next time on Wolf Tells, where the darkness always has a story to share.